and welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network, especially to those of you in Pac-12 country, because it's here. The listeners have been pining for it. They've been asking for it. It is part of getting you ready for every single college football season. It is counting them up like nobody else does. Here on the Cover 3 podcast, we've got our first set of win totals. Today, we will be tackling the Pac-12 North. Wednesday, we will be tackling the Pac-12 South. After that, we will be getting into the Big 12 the following week, then the ACC, then the Big 10, then the SEC, then our win totals locks, and oh my goodness, by then it's week 0, and we're going to all of a sudden be here. Things are about to pick up speed, so make sure that you are subscribed to the Cover 3 podcast. If you have not already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, smash that bell for notifications, hit that subscribe and like, and come and jump on in the chat. You know, we're going to be breaking down the 6 teams in the Pac-12 North today. And if you've got thoughts, we'd love to hear those as well. Gentlemen, how did it feel to go through the preparation process? Because this is, even for us, a big part of sort of getting the gears going for getting ready for the season. We cobble our takes together that we'll end up using for, I don't know, two months. We do it right now. How are we feeling as we get ready for win totals to start?
We needed this so badly. Like,
True.
I had to work this weekend. I had to cover in case any news broke and any schools decided to realign, which is why we're doing the Pac-12 to start, because the Pac-12 might not exist in a week. So we wanted to get it out of the way. But as I had to be on the internet all weekend. I'm on Twitter just in case news breaks. I got to be on top of things. And the entire weekend was nothing but Formula One, Wimbledon, and Scottish Open tweets. And I'm sitting there thinking, my God, do we need football worse than ever right now? These people are desperate and thirsty for real sports.
Definitely noticed that trend as well. I cannot. What are we? 7 weeks from Saturday, so less than a couple months. I don't know. I noticed more, and this goes back to the old topics that we've been talking about, to like the separation of powers. They exist in college football, but they almost feel like they exist in conferences too. When you look at the very tip tops of the conference, and I think the Pac-12 is one of the ones that's most glaring. Why, if you were one of the teams at the top, you would want out?
Because you're looking at the rest of the conference, and you're like, these are teams that are going to be lucky if they get to bowl games, right? We're going to, I definitely see what you're saying there. All right. Well, we're going to bring him back. We own his likeness and his voice, at least when it comes to these win totals. For the first time as we prepare for the 2022 season, you ready for the general manager of Vanderbilt to get us going and count them up?
Let's do it.
As much as I think it's the under is a safe play, like I can't even.
Count them up! Count them up! How many kids are going to win this fall?
I can't fathom 8 wins.
How many kids are going to win this fall?
I just can't. I don't see it. It's not on there. It's not the schedule I'm looking at. Unless there's another schedule somewhere.
It's not on the schedule he's looking at.
That's 8 wins. Is that maybe we'll get him in to do his own intro for the SEC East a little bit later. We might have a Nashville trip coming up too. Maybe we can get him in person and get to talk to him. But we begin with the Oregon Ducks. All of these win total prices and totals come from the Caesars Sportsbook. Oregon's currently pulled this morning at 9 wins, over at -115, under at -115, split prices on both sides. The season starts with just the absolutely massive showdown with Georgia in Atlanta. It gets Dan Lanning against his old team, the reigning national champions, against a defensive coordinator. You know, we've got a quarterback situation that includes another familiar face for the Georgia Bulldogs, as Bo Nix has arrived. We can get into whether we think he's going to be the answer, whether we think he's going to be the starter. Ty Thompson and Jay Butterfield round out that room. We've got, one of the best linebacker rooms in the country, headlined by Noah Sewell and Justin Flo. Some questions certainly elsewhere on the roster in the depth chart. So as we are looking at Oregon, it is the largest total in the Pac-12 North. They are, I think, that sort of the unquestioned Pac-12 North favorites. How are we feeling about over under 9?
Over?
Is it easy over?
No, for me, this is a situation where you mentioned everything that Oregon has. Like, if you look at the Pac-12 North, they're the most complete team. Like, there's a lot of teams in this division where you feel good about one side of the ball, but you're really not sure about the other side. Like, hey, I feel good about the offense, defense, or vice versa. Oregon's the one team where it's like, offensively, they're not going to be scoring 45 points a game, kind of super explosive. That's just not who they've been the last few years, but they're still efficient and they can still put up points and they can still move the ball. And defensively, I think they're going to be solid. So when I look at their schedule, I think Georgia's a loss. I feel like that's pretty safe. I mean, the game is at a neutral site in Atlanta. I don't see Oregon in Dan Lanning's first game flying across the country and beating Georgia to start the seasons. But you look at the rest of the schedule, like Eastern Washington should be a win. BYU at home should be a win. It's not a guaranteed win, though. BYU's pretty good. Wazoo on the road, I give them that win, but it's still kind of iffy. Stanford, Arizona should be wins. UCLA win, at Cal probably a win, at Colorado probably a win, Washington, Utah, Oregon State probably a win, but not like decisive. I look at this team and I think they're going 9-3 at worst, which is where the win total is set, or not at worst, but I think they're going 9-3, and I feel like 10-2 is more likely than 8-4 slightly. So I go over, but it's not. When we get to the locks pod at the end of all this, Oregon's probably not going to be on it.
Or a lot of these Pac-12 teams, to be honest with you. But what I had almost the exact same thoughts you did. Like, do you feel great about the over? No, but I feel better than I do about 8 wins. Exactly like you're talking about. Like, there is some push protection, I feel like. I think this team, I think Dan Lanning, great hire. I think he's inheriting a pretty good roster because Mario, if you look at his recruiting classes, always had some, pretty significant, recruits coming in there. I think the other thing that can kind of be good for this team is to get some toughness. Like, they've always been about the offensive side of the ball and having offensive-minded coaches. I think Dan Lanning will bring in a mentality. Now, if only he could bring in all those 5 first-round draft picks, he could have a lot more success on the defense side of the ball. But I do think they'll be better defensively. I had them going 10-2, just penciling in, and I was pretty much agreement on some of the, iffy games. But I think they're going to be. I think that I like the over better in this one. I don't like the under at all, and I kind of think like you. I think they'll probably end up at 9-3.
I do think Mario had them going that direction, though.
Like, getting tougher.
Yeah. I don't think they were finished there yet, but I think that you're like having a defensive coordinator come in from Georgia. I do think that, this is a team that it's like I said, it's the most complete team. Chip, where are you going?
I've got it pushed to over. You guys and the Cover 3 listeners are going to get sick of the win-loss toss-up analysis matrix that I put together.
I forget your science.
But as I was breaking it out, it is so notable to me that the toss-up games, as I've identified them, are all in Eugene. BYU in Eugene, UCLA in Eugene, Washington, Utah in Eugene. And then the other toss-up that I had on there was Oregon State. A tough game, but a rivalry game, so sort of comes with its own mojo anyway. So the fact that you're going to be looking at, as I'm looking at it, Georgia is the only certified, I'm going to sit here and say they're going to lose that game. You're not going to win every single toss-up, but you're going to give yourself a great chance to win more toss-ups than you lose when they're all in your home stadium, especially a home stadium that when it gets rocking, then Autzen awesome. Like that, I don't do a good job of factoring in home field advantage in terms of the number of points it is. But if I was to just be able to have like a simple thumbs up, thumbs down, do I think your home stadium makes a significant difference? I think Oregon can absolutely ride that. And so with the BYU, UCLA, Washington, Utah, huge toss-up games for Oregon, all of them coming at home, that seems like a big-time advantage. And they avoid USC. They do. Here's what I had for my negatives. They need some skill players to step up on offense. They've got a running back named Byron Caldwell, who I think is going to do good with Travis Dye gone and CJ Verdell gone. But still, you're asking him to take on a lot of load with those two very good rushers gone. They need the back end of the defense. They lost 2 starters at cornerback and one of the best safeties in the entire country. So they need some, Dan Lanning needs to be able to identify some players who can step up there. But I agree with your comment, Tom, the most complete team in the Pac-12. most complete team in the Pac-12 North. So I got it around 9-3. So I'm sort of a push to over. So we're pretty much all on the same page right there.
Count them out.
Ducks 12-0.
Ducks 12-0.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We turn it on to Washington. They've got the second highest win total in the division at Caesars Sportsbook at 7.5 wins. Over a little bit more heavily juiced here at -125. The under checking in at -105. You've got a schedule that includes a visit from Michigan State. You do also avoid USC, at least in the cross-division draw. And the non-conference, though, also hands you Kent State and Portland State, something that should allow first-year coach Kalen DeBoer a nice little runway to get things going. Michael Penix Jr., Kalen DeBoer has a good relationship from him back from being at Indiana. He steps in at the quarterback position, though there are some younger players who are on that roster who might factor in. If Penix, who's had a little bit of an injury history, does end up getting banged up, I do think that they've got some depth in that room. Pass rush and defensive line, just awesome, just from what I'm looking at going into the season. My expectation that will all be very good. So it's 7.5 wins. How do we think year one's going to go for the Huskies? Under.
Okay, I want to hear your explanation, then I'll get into mine.
Okay, I think that it is going to be difficult. We put a lot of the Washington's offense struggling so much. We put it on Jimmy Lake and the defensive coordinator as head coach impact. But it also, to me, still looks like it is an absence of proven difference makers at the skill positions to where you can have an explosive offense, and that riding a very good defense and, just kind of keeping things manageable is something that, might still be around even as you've made an offensive hire in Kalen DeBoer and you're hoping that he's going to bring an offensive spark. I think that in terms of the schedule, there's not a lot of surefire losses. At UCLA, at Oregon are probably going to end up being L's. But as I sort of shake out the rest of it, Michigan State winning that game flips this the other way. I've got them finishing 7-5. I probably think Michigan State's going to be a loss. And then the other games that I had that were sort of giving me some trouble, I will get to it on Wednesday. I have no idea what to think of Arizona State, but at Arizona State, at Cal, at Washington State, all those games are winnable for Washington. But until I see an offense that's taking a big step forward, I'm not ready to commit to that.
I was trying to figure out this morning before we started what shirt to wear for the show. And, I have a Washington shirt, and I was like, we are doing the Pac-12 North. So I was like, all right, what's the Pac-12 North school whose shirt I can wear? And I was going to wear the Washington shirt. But the problem was I didn't want to wear the shirt of a team if I was taking the under.
And you're taking the under too? I'm
taking the under. And it's for a lot of the reasons you're saying. I don't have much faith in this offense or trust yet to where I'm willing to bank on it getting to 8 wins. I think defensively, they're going to be solid. I think offensively, going back to his days at Indiana, I've never really been a Michael Penix kind of backer or believer. I think that there's way too much chuck it up and hope for the best to his game. And I don't know if Washington really has the guys on offense that can, make that work, but maybe they do. I think Jalen Polk's a pretty decent player. I think Jalen McKillen's a good player. But I also worry, like Jackson Kirkland is the best player on the offensive line as far as reputation, but he was going to leave last year and go to the NFL, but he pulled out of the draft because his ankle injury that he suffered that cost him time was significant enough to where he didn't want to go leave the league because it was going to hurt his draft stock. So I have questions about how healthy Kirkland is. And even if he's at 100% or not, is he going to be able to be as the player he was beforehand if his ankle if there's an actual problem with it. So I have concerns about that. And I just don't know how many points this team is going to score. But then you get to the schedule and, the road test, I don't think they're beating Michigan State. I don't think Michigan State is as good as it was last year. I think Michigan State's going to take a step back, but I do think they're still better than Washington, and they could go on the road and win that game. And while I'm not just going to give the win to the Spartans, I think that they're winning that 60% of the time. UCLA on the road is going to be difficult. Arizona State on the road, we'll get to that later this week. I don't have the highest of hopes for Arizona State, but that's still early enough in the season to where maybe the wheels haven't completely fallen off yet. So maybe it's a bit more challenging. Even I glanced over it too. The opener against Kent State is going to be tough. I think Washington wins that game far more often than not, but that is not a fun team to start your year against. Like we see every single season in the opener, there are major upsets that happen. To me, that's one of those kind of mismatches where upsets sometimes happen because that team can put up points in a hurry, and I just don't know if I trust Washington to outscore it if it has to. Cal on the road is one of those coin flip games, but it's on the road. Oregon on the road is tough. Wazoo in the Apple Cup on the road, that's going to be tough. I think this team is getting to a bowl game comfortably, but I think 7-5 is far more likely than 8-4.
I'm on the other side.
Nice.
Because you're a Penix backer. You love Michael
No,
Penix.
so but I don't know if Penix is going to be the guy. Like
Mhm.
I think the competition will be a good one because I think it'll elevate the quarterback play. And I remember, like you guys know why I'm high on Kalen DeBoer, right? You remember my Indiana love affair was when I met him in those meetings. I was like, oh, this is the guy. I do think he's been a coach in this trajectory for a reason. Like I think he gets buy-in. I think the team, and this was a program that was a dumpster fire last year. Just the Jimmy Lake stuff hanging over it. Really since Peterson stepped down, it just felt like it was kind of just a program that really wasn't getting buy-in. Exactly what I'm talking about. Just in a positive direction. It seemed like there were more questions than answers. I think the offense is going to be better. And again, I think this is a defensive-minded team that's always had a very physical defense. And I think talent-wise, they'll have more than a lot of those teams. So I had them losing to Michigan State too. I had them. I don't know which one, but I had them the Arizona State, Arizona back-to-back weeks. I had them losing. Like I had them losing on the road, winning at home. I wouldn't be surprised if if that was the opposite, but I kind of had those games lumped in there. Colorado's a team. I don't know what to expect from them, but I have Washington winning that one at home. I have them beating Oregon State, losing to Oregon, and then winning in the Apple Cup. On the road is probably the game that I could be sweating out for this one. That one to me, because I'm with you. I think it'll be around here. Confidence level over is about a 3 out of 10. But I'm a believer in Kalen DeBoer and this program kind of getting back to where it belongs. And I of all the programs too, like, and we'll do Cal in a little bit, some of these other teams that were just devastated by COVID, like losing development and losing practice time. Like some are more impacted more than others, and I know Washington was too, but I think they're in a better position as a roster than some of the teams that they're facing here on the back end.
They won only 4 games last year, and looking at the roster and looking at the schedule, there's a high floor of bowling, right? Like we're going to take a 4-win team, and they almost certainly seem like they're going to be improving by at least 2 wins. I'm just not ready to do that. Again, you get Stanford, Arizona, Colorado. It's just kind of nice to be able to look at it and just chalk up a couple W's right there. And then hopefully you can go and nab another one of these toss-up games and be able to get yourself looking good, maybe even battling for second place in the Pac-12 North. How many games are going to win this fall? You mentioned that Kent State's very tough for Washington, but Kent State, Portland State is, it's something that's a little bit friendly. And we have so much positivity for Jonathan Smith and Oregon State, and they are going to make this man start the season against Boise State and Fresno State in back-to-back weeks.
Yeah.
Oh man, how are we going to get the beat? All right, so anyway, Oregon State 6 wins. The price right now at Caesars is split -115, -115. It's about as middle of the road as you can get. 6 wins on the projection and the price evenly split. I mentioned that Boise State and Fresno State are in the non-con. Montana State is the 3rd non-conference foe that they've got. The cross-division draw includes USC and Utah and Arizona State, and Arizona State's on the road. We've loved what this team and program have been able to do building up the offensive line. Chance Nolan at his best has proven to be a very good quarterback amongst Pac-12 quarterbacks. So 6 wins. Is Jonathan Smith going to get the Beavs back to another bowl game?
I think you're underselling this schedule. Like, that's a brutal start. Like, they start with Boise, then they're on the road at Fresno, and Montana State went like 12-3 last year. It's not just some pushover FCS team. It was one of the better teams at the FCS level. And then you get USC and at Utah. Those are your first 5 games. That's not going to be a fun start. The good news is I do think they're going to win 2 or 3 of them. So I have this being a push. I don't like saying it, but if I have to choose a side, I have a slight lean to the under more to the over because of that start to the schedule. Like that, you could start off 0-2 in conference. You might start off 0-2 on the season. You might, this is a team that realistically, if you look at that schedule, those first 5 games, if they're 1-4 come that end of the first weekend in October, I don't think it's going to be a shock. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but if it could happen, and that will be really hard to recover from, because that would mean that they have to go 5-2 down the stretch just to get to the push, 6-1 to get to the over. So I think 6-6. I think the Beavers are going bowling. I think offensively, they are probably going to be the most explosive, best offense in the division. And I think that will keep them in games against a lot of other teams in the division. Although defensively, I do think they need to take, they need to shore some things up or else they're going to be caught in some bad spots. But I think they'll be able to score enough points to beat a lot of the teams in the back half of this schedule. So I don't think the floor is going to completely fall out on them, but I do think 6-6 is probably your best case scenario here. So I have to lean under, though I don't really like it.
Same. I'm on the under as well. The schedule's brutal. I'm a believer in what you can get. Like, momentum works both ways. I think it could be an uphill battle after those first 5 games, and just getting guys to buy in, to keep the confidence level, to keep the work ethic up, to keep, are you clawing away for that bowl appearance? And they probably will be, but I just don't see it. I don't see how you can get to 7 wins over that. I'm with you. I lean the under. It's not going to be one of the locks pod, but if you're forcing me to pick one, I'll say under.
Counterpoint, you beat Boise and Fresno and you're cruising.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that could happen. You could be 3-0.
Yeah. I don't think that when we mentioned that it is comparatively difficult, I do not think that Oregon State is going to go into those games feeling like an underdog, or if they are a betting underdog, not a significant betting underdog. I think that those are going to be opportunities for wins. And so, yes, if they end up being losses, then getting to 6 is going to be difficult. It will require going to Stanford in that amazing Stanford home atmosphere and bringing all the juice to be able to go out there and get a win. It would require going to Seattle and beating Washington in their house. It would maybe even require beating Oregon in the rivalry game. But if you are able to beat Boise State and Fresno State, or heck, even split them, you've got Washington State at home, you've got Colorado at home, you've got Cal at home. Those are games that can be wins. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a much more manageable position when it comes to getting there. I just think that the key word for me is depth, because they're not so thin that a couple of injuries is going to hurt them late in the year. Jonathan Smith has done a good job with recruiting, player development, building this thing out. So even if they, for example, along that stellar offensive line, get a couple injuries, I think that staff feels confident enough that they're going to be able to continue to be strong all throughout the year. They've just been building to this. I don't think it's a shaky situation. Very difficult start, but I've still got confidence. I've got it projected as 6-6, but if on my push under, push over, give me one with the Beavs. I'll go push over.
I want to bring one thing up too. We should have mentioned it at the top of the show, but like for those watching now or who are listening later, when we talk about the North and the South and the cross divisional games, and we talk about them and the other teams in their division, we know that the Pac-12 no longer has divisions, but the schedules didn't change. They're still playing the same divisional schedules that they had originally in part for the season. So you might not be in the Pac-12 North, but you're still playing a Pac-12 North schedule. So that's why when Chip says cross divisional, or why if I'm saying, well, in the rest of your division, that's why we're doing it.
But to win the Pac-12, you do not need to win your division, because the divisions don't matter for that.
Correct.
We're just going with the highest win percentage between them.
Count them out.
Ooh, boy. Cal Golden Bears. It's been a rough go, Justin Wilcox and this Bears program. Over under win total at Caesar Sportsbook set at 5.5. We got even split on the prices, minus 115 each way. The non-con includes a trip to South Bend to play Notre Dame to go with UC Davis and UNLV coming to visit Berkeley. Things do get difficult as they've got a road trip to USC on the schedule. But other than that, mostly run-of-the-mill when compared to the rest of the teams that we're talking about right here. The quarterback position, I guess we're going with Purdue's Jack Plummer. That is my assumption here. I don't think that that's enough of a that's not a difference maker for me in a way that inspires a lot of confidence in a Cal offense that has been hit and miss, is putting it kindly. For the most part, it's been a pretty bad offense over the last couple of seasons. So can this offense find any kind of juice? Will this defense be strong enough for the Bears to be able to go and exceed this win total and make it to a bowl game? What's our read on Cal?
Yeah, the Big Ten sent Jack Plummer to the Pac-12 for USC, UCLA. A lot of critics don't think it's a very good trade for the Pac-12, but time will tell the tale. Under. I think I'm pretty confident on this one. What's the offense? Like, this is a team that has struggled so badly to score points. And it's like last year, if I looked at this, let me check it real quick. But last year, like, this is a team that had one of the better turnover margins in the Pac-12 and in the country. Yeah, they had a plus 10. Yeah. So that was tied for 10th in the nation, is one of the highest turnover. And you still struggled to win games and score points. And it's like, that's probably going to balance out a little bit. Maybe not, because they are so conservative offensively that it does limit the turnovers when you just turn around and hand it off most of the time. But there's just such a lack of danger in that Cal offense when I watch it. Like, there's really nothing that you have to fear. They haven't had much of an explosive attack vertically. They have to put together long drives without screwing things up, and they have trouble finishing it at times. And that makes it really difficult to win games consistently. And unless we see that offense kind of take a step forward this year, and I'm not saying it can't happen, but until I see it, it's really difficult for me to look at this win total and say that this team's going to get to a bowl game, especially when you look at a schedule that has Notre Dame on the road. You get Wazoo on the road. You get Colorado on the road. Like you're saying, these are the Wazoo and Colorado are kind of like those make or break games for you if you're going to have a good season or if you're going to have a disappointing season. So to get them on the road, same as the Oregon State game, that hurts. I mean, and your winnable games, the more winnable games that are supposed to be at home, you've got Washington, Oregon, UCLA. Like, the degree of difficulty on this schedule is turned up a little bit, where I just don't have any confidence that the Bears are going to be able to get to a bowl this year.
You mentioned some of the other games you might think is going to UC Davis. Watch out for my guy, Dan Hawkins. They went to Tulsa last year, week 1, knocked off Tulsa early in the year. I think it's probably, they'll be favorites, but it's not one you feel outstanding about. When I went through it, I had 5 lock losses and up to 6, 7, or 8 where I was kind of leaning more towards the losses. When I get that much of a strong indication, I got to go under. And probably one of the ones that we said, I don't know, like this one probably feel more confident about that they will not reach it. And this program's been a dumpster fire too, as far as, again, COVID's impact is still felt, I think, in the Pac-12 more than any other. I mean, remember they were petitioning to play a game? Was that this past season, or was that, I lose track of the times, but I mean, this team still lost time last year, I believe. Weren't they the only team that lost a game last year because of COVID?
I don't know. Let me check that real quick.
They tried to reschedule the USC game, and they did end up rescheduling it, and it was at the end of the year. They ended up winning that game 24-14. It was funny. One of my first notes when looking back at 2021 was like, okay, they won 4 out of their final 6, but I immediately ruled that out from being a positive, because you know what one of the losses was? 10-3 to Arizona. And we love Jed Fish, but a 10-3 loss to Arizona in the middle of winning that 4 out of your last 6 does in fact make me sort of rule it out. Here was the other piece of this that I thought was interesting. Do you guys remember that reportedly Justin Wilcox turned down the Oregon job and then ended up signing an extension with Cal through 2027? That's a lot of confidence in the roster, I guess. I mean, 5 of their 7 losses last year, they went 5-7, were by 7 points or less. And, his messaging has been all about trying to win at the margins. We've just got to flip that the other way. And a lot of people will tell you, find a team that lost a bunch of close games because the balls should bounce the other way. But this is already a team that was doing well at the margins, as Tom mentioned, with one of the top 10 best turnover margins in the entire country. It's not fishy as though something is up, but it is at least interesting that what I think would be a very good job at Oregon with a roster that, as we mentioned, is among the most talented in the entire conference, that you maybe would have turned that down, especially with it also being his alma mater, to come back to this Cal roster, which I see as a big time uphill battle just to even make it to a bowl game. Is Justin Wilcox coaching for Cal next year too? Did he buy himself some job security by committing to him?
I don't think Cal is going to sign. Cal doesn't strike me as the kind of school that's going to sign a coach to that contract extension and then fire them a year later. This isn't Auburn. You know what I mean? This is just like, nope, it's our football program. It's not that big of a deal to us.
Which is why USC and UCLA yet were traded for Jack Plummer and made it out to the Big Ten, where they'll invest a little bit more. Coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to Jake Dickert's first full year at Washington State, and David Shaw and Stanford have one of the top quarterback prospects in the entire country. What about the rest of the team? And is that going to be enough to get them to a bowl? We'll get into that and more next.
Can someone please tell me what's going on?
You went ballistic on everyone.
I want in your water park right now!
And then you went full nuclear, Karen.
Go, kids, go!
Ah! I want to speak to your
South Park: The Streaming Wars Part 2, streaming July 13th.
I'll put you on TikTok! You're all about to be fired!
Exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Cover 3 listeners, Cover 3 viewers, we are a nominee for the Best Sports Podcast category in the People's Choice Podcast Awards. We appreciate all that you guys do for us, and we hope that you enjoy our show enough to nominate us to advance us all the way to the final round. Here's how you do it. To nominate the Cover 3 podcast, go to podcastawards.com/app/sign up and then toggle down to the sports category. Again, that is podcastawards.com/app/sign up and then toggle down to the sports category. The whole process is only going to take about 60 seconds. We've included a link at the top of the episode description if you are listening on an audio platform. And if you're watching live right now on YouTube or on the replay, it's right there at the bottom of the screen, podcastawards.com/app/sign up to vote for the Cover 3 podcast for the best sports podcast. We turn our attention to Washington State, where the Cougars have an over-under win total at Caesars Sportsbook of 5 wins. Over a little bit juiced here at -130. The under with some plus value at +100. They get a visit from the Badgers at Wisconsin. Oh, they go to Camp Randall, excuse me. At Wisconsin in the non-con. Idaho and Colorado State will be coming to Pullman. They've got Utah coming to their house. They go to USC. The rest of it breaks out, about pretty evenly. In fact, there is a little bit of an advantage in catching Oregon and Washington both being home games. Potentially one of the most electric transfer quarterbacks that often in a off-season full of quarterback transfers, one that has been flying a little bit below the radar is Cameron Ward. The FCS transfer is a great playmaker. And look, they might need his ability to extend the play with his legs because this offensive line is suspect. Can he be out there, prolific, productive, and help this Washington State offense be great? Well, I think the defense is a positive. They've got depth. They've got experience. They're pretty good on that side of the ball, and that could help Washington State get this over and make it to a bowl game. Do we think it happens at over under 5 wins?
Yes.
You've got over.
I've got over. I'm feeling pretty good about this one. It's funny, if you look at Wazoo last year and they had the coaching turnover in the middle of the season and things got kind of crazy, but they did a really good job. Dickert did a really good job of kind of keeping things together and moving together, keeping the team together, keeping the locker room together and moving forward and playing well. But what was strange about Wazoo last year is because compared to what we'd become used to in the Mike Leach era, like they were better defensively than they were offensively. And that's why I think the addition of Cam Ward to this offense is going to have a big boost for them in 2022. And you mentioned it, Chip. The offensive line last year was a problem. And I think that offensive line, like when I see games against Wisconsin, Oregon, USC, Washington, maybe Utah, definitely, I see them really struggling in those games with that offensive line. But those are the only games where I can look at on the schedule where I'm like, that's going to be a definite problem for them. I see the other opponents on here and I think they can overcome it. They could play around it. And I think Ward gives them a dimension offensively that they didn't have last year, which will make them more explosive. He'll be able to keep drives alive on third downs and stuff with his legs, with his arm. And I think that alone, I'm not sitting there going to say the Cougs are suddenly going to go 8-9-3, 8-4, but I do think this is a team that's going to get to a bowl game and is going to get past 5 wins. I've got them at 6-6. I think 7-5 is very much in play. So this is a pretty solid over for me.
I'm with you. I had 6-6 for the record as well. A lot of times when you fire a coach or you part ways with a coach, it's like starting over, except when you have the situation which they had with Rolovich and the vaccine and everything that happened there, and you go with an interim coach and then he wins the job and you're able to keep some continuity on the staff and the system that you're running. So I like that aspect of it. Thought the team from a leadership standpoint really stepped up and said, hey, we don't care what's going on. We're still going to, we have our eyes focused on the prize. And then the one wild card here too, which I cannot wait to see play, is Cam Ward, the transfer who was what's the name for the Heisman at the FCS? I forget the name.
Walter Payton, right?
Walter Payton.
It's the Walter Payton one. Yeah. So, I mean, the best player at that level, getting an opportunity at this level in a system which is very quarterback friendly, where you should put up some big numbers. I think their offense is going to be off the charts. I think it's going to be a ton of fun to watch, but I have them over here as well.
I've got them pushed to under.
And
I don't.
No fun.
It is thin. Like Cameron Ward is a noted ad-libber, figure it out. He had 71 touchdowns in a season and a half, right? Like he's incredibly productive, 40 some touchdowns last year. Jake Dickert's been comparing him to Brett Favre in terms of him just being a gunslinger out there. I am concerned that with the offensive line and with exposing his body to maybe more body shots, that you could end up with some quarterback injury. Might be a game, might be half of a game, something that would create him missing time. And I'm concerned about the quarterback depth at Washington State. So for that reason, I end up going pushed under. I think that the toss-up games, as I look at it, are Cal at Stanford, Arizona State at Arizona, Washington. I am perhaps a little bit too high on Arizona in that analysis, maybe even too high on Cal and Stanford, but still the schedule as a whole, you mentioned at Wisconsin, I think is a loss. Oregon is a loss, at USC, at Oregon State, and Utah. I just really quickly get to 7-5 as their ceiling. And so winning enough of those toss-up games when we've got the potential of Cameron Ward. If it's not Cameron Ward, then I don't think Washington State gets to a bowl game. Washington State is good enough that they could be 7-5 and exceed this win total, Tom, like you mentioned, by 2 games. And I'm rooting for that because it sounds like you're a
Washington State hater. Clearly,
it could be incredibly fun to watch Washington State have a really electric offense here this season. But ultimately, I've got it around 5-7. And if you make me choose over or under, I'm going to go under. Hater.
How many games are going to win this fall?
Stanford Cardinal have an over-under win total at the Caesars Sportsbook of 4.5 wins. This proud program that was playing for and winning Pac-12 titles not all that long ago, and even has a quarterback, as I mentioned earlier in the show, that is one of the top NFL draft quarterback prospects in Tanner McKee. The recruiting has, in the last cycle or cycle and a half, really started to turn around. But the roster as it stands, and goodness gracious, this schedule sets up for an incredibly uphill battle if Stanford is going to be able to make it back into a bowl game. 3 straight seasons have ended without a bowl appearance for Stanford. If it happens again, and they even get over this win total and only finish 5-7, it would be 4 straight years without a bowl appearance. Schedule, I think, is the toughest in the division.
Murder.
It's USC, at Washington, at Oregon, at Notre Dame, at UCLA, at Utah, BYU, all so difficult. Oregon State, Arizona State, Washington State, at least maybe those, or at Cal, those are games that Stanford can at least go into it, hoping you're going to be able to pull it together. I mean, guys, the only surefire win here is against toothpaste. I'm like entirely, not my heart goes out, but like I am just, befuddled at how Stanford can look at this schedule and even imagine that this bowl drought is going to be snapped in 2022.
So is it safe to say you're on the under?
Yeah, it's safe to say I'm on the under.
Well, they gave him a cakewalk this year because didn't they play 12 Power 5 teams last year?
True.
So now they gave him this cakewalk with Colgate out of the opener. So they're letting the foot off the gas a little bit.
They're gonna feel free and easy now.
Yeah.
Stanford.
I like David Shaw a lot. I do. There's a piece of me that says, you know what? Like, because they were good 2 years ago. Like last year was abysmal. And then you go back to 2020 and they were 4-2 in a COVID year. But man, this thing feels like it's trending in the wrong direction. And it's one of those ones where I hope I'm wrong, but the schedule is brutal. Tanner McKee is much like when I saw his name mentioned for some of the, first round. I mean, I saw him as a top 10 pick. I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. It's not on film. That's got to be all on. He's 6'6", 220. He's got a strong arm. He didn't look like the most mobile quarterback that was out there. So I like him, but I don't know if I'm bought on him just putting the team on his back and carrying them. I'm going under. The
pass game should be good. Like the wide receivers are all like 6'3", 220. Yeah. Like they've got big old bodied receivers. They should, on paper, be able to go out and have success there. I just have questions on the offensive line, questions on the defensive line, whether the defense is going to be really dominant or whether they're just going to end up getting pushed around and run past when they go out there against some of the better teams on the schedule. And the schedule is loaded with better teams.
Yeah, that defense was bad last year. Like if you look at success rate, they ranked 127th in the country at 51.5%. The next worst in the conference was at 55% USC. But I think we're kind of all in agreement here. This is an under for me. I think Tanner McKee's good. I don't think Tanner McKee is great, and I definitely don't think he's good enough to overcome a lot of the roster deficiencies on both sides of the ball here. And then as we got off on the very top, like the schedule truly is murder. Chip, you read it off. Like they start with Colgate and then they get USC at home, but then they get Washington and Oregon on the road in back-to-back weeks. Then after coming home for Oregon State, they're back on the road to face Notre Dame. And they get UCLA on the road and Utah on the road. But more than any of that, it's they play that Colgate, they play USC, then they have a bye.
Yeah, the week 3 bye.
And then they don't get a week off for the next 3 months. So it's like by the time once they get past that Washington, Oregon State, Notre Dame kind of gauntlet, and they get to the part of the schedule where things ease up a bit with the Arizona States, UCLA's, Wazoo, Cal, like they're going to be beat to hell by the time they get there. So it is really hard for me to envision this team getting to 5 wins, let alone 6. So I think this is a pretty easy underplay.
And just think about the physical brutality of getting Utah and BYU in November.
Oh God, you're like that's the last thing that this team is going to want to deal with by the time they get there.
No. Yeah,
and they got Cal in between, and I know Cal isn't BYU and Utah, but Cal's not exactly soft. Like they don't play a soft brand of football.
That could be their bowl, potential clinching win too.
For Cal?
If they're so that could be an inspired performance for them playing at home.
Trying to get the big axe in the game. All right, so Bud was not able to make us. He will be back for the Pac-12 South. Tom, you want to read his notes?
Sure, I will leave out the swears, Bud. It's a family show. Jeez. Just some overall thoughts. The Oregon secondary might be poop, but the offensive line is very strong. Wazoo lost a ton of talent, but it also has some stability this year. Stanford's poop roster, but I think the quarterback's okay. Oregon State wanted JT Daniels, which scares me about what they have since I think he's kind of washed, but the rest of the roster is nice. Cal doesn't see it offensively still, and they lost a lot on D, so he's worried there. So that sounds like an under. And he says Washington, he's with me. He's not a believer in Penix, and he questions how much offensive development the roster got the last 2 years and how much the new head coach can fix in only one off season. So he's thinking that Washington's more of a year 2 under Kalen DeBoer than it's going to be a year 1. So overall, I'd say that the 4 of us don't really have a ton of optimism about this division in 2022.
The teams in this half of the standings, or this
yeah,
in the artist formerly known as the Pac-12 North. I will say that my I've got the over for Oregon, the over for Oregon State, and then everything else I've got under or push to under. So it's either the Ducks or the Beavers, or it's teams that are trying to figure it out, which isn't crazy considering that, you know, Washington State and Washington both underwent coaching changes and have a little bit of roster rebuilding that they need to do as well. We will be back on Wednesday to tackle the rest of the Pac-12. It will be the teams in the artist formerly known as the Pac-12 South. That is USC, which has 9 wins on their Caesars win total. Utah, 9. UCLA, 8.5. See, we already got like more total wins combined if you add up their win totals in this side of the standings. Arizona State at 6. Colorado at 3.5, Arizona at 2.5. We will be breaking down all of those win totals on Wednesday. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Cover 3 podcast so that you can get it first. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.